I never thought the woman I once loved would try to destroy me in court. Sitting in that cold waiting room, my hands shaking, as I held the lawsuit papers, I kept asking myself how it came to this. Jessica wanted revenge for something I did not do. She wanted to ruin me, to take everything I had built, to make me pay for walking away. But what she did not know was that her lies would backfire in ways she never imagined. The truth has a funny way of coming out, especially when someone is desperate enough to weaponize the legal system for personal vendetta. Before we dive into what happened in that courtroom, I would love to know where you are watching this from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. If you have ever been wrongly accused or had someone try to destroy your reputation, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Now let me take you back to where it all started, to the moment I met the woman who would later become my worst nightmare. I met Jessica 3 years ago at a small coffee shop in Portland. It was one of those rainy October mornings when the city smells like wet pavement and roasted beans. I was grabbing my usual Americano before heading to work when she walked in, shaking droplets from her umbrella. She had this energy about her, confident and purposeful, the kind of person who commands attention without trying. We ended up chatting while waiting for our orders, and before I knew it, we had exchanged numbers. Those first few months were incredible. Jessica worked in marketing for a tech startup downtown, and she was driven, ambitious, someone who seemed to know exactly what she wanted from life. We started dating 2 weeks after that coffee shop encounter, and things moved fast. We would spend weekends hiking the trails around Columbia River Gorge, pack lunches, and lose ourselves in the wilderness for hours. Sunday nights became our cooking ritual, where we would experiment with new recipes, usually ending in laughter when something burned or did not turn out quite right. I genuinely thought I had found the one. She was smart-driven, and we shared the same dreams about building a life together. After a year of dating, we decided to move in together. We found this small apartment in northeast Portland, nothing fancy, but it was ours. The first few months of living together felt like a dream. We would wake up early, make breakfast together, and head to our respective jobs. Life seemed perfect, or at least I thought it was. But somewhere around the 18-month mark, things started to shift. Jessica became more demanding, more controlling. She wanted to know where I was at all times, who I was with what I was doing. At first, I chalked it up to her being concerned, maybe a little insecure about our relationship. I tried to be understanding, to reassure her that I was committed to us, but it kept getting worse. She started checking my phone while I slept. I would wake up in the middle of the night and catch her scrolling through my messages, looking at my call logs. When I confronted her about it, she would flip it around, accuse me of having something to hide. She became hostile toward my friends, especially the women I worked with. There was this colleague named Lauren, who I collaborated with on projects strictly professional, but Jessica was convinced something more was going on. The accusations became a nightly occurrence. No matter how much I explained, no matter how many times I showed her, there was nothing between Lauren and me. Jessica refused to believe it. She would say things like, "I saw the way she looks at you," or "I know what is really happening." The constant suspicion was exhausting. I felt like I was living under surveillance, like every move I made was being scrutinized and judged. After months of this, I made the hardest decision I had made in years. I told Jessica we needed to end things. I could not keep living in this environment of constant distrust and accusations. It was killing me, slowly, draining every ounce of happiness from my life. I remember the night I told her. We were sitting in our living room after another heated argument, and I just said it. "I cannot do this anymore. We need to break up." She cried. She begged. She promised she would change, that she would work on her insecurity, that things would be different. But I had heard it all before. I had given her chances, and nothing changed. I was done. I packed my things that night and moved in with my best friend Marcus temporarily just until I could find my own place. I blocked Jessica's number, her social media, everything. I needed a clean break. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing. I started to think maybe she had accepted it, that we could both move on with our lives. Then she showed up at my workplace. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was in a meeting when my manager came in and said there was someone in the lobby causing a disturbance. I went down, and there she was, Jessica yelling at the receptionist demanding to see me. Security had to escort her out. It was humiliating and terrifying at the same time. But even that was not the worst of it. 3 months after our breakup, after I had finally started to feel like myself again, I received a certified letter in the mail. It was a summons to appear in court. Jessica was suing me. I stood there in Marcus's apartment reading the document, over and over, unable to process what I was seeing. She was actually taking me to court. The lawsuit was 20 pages of accusations and lies. Jessica was suing me for 3 things: emotional distress, financial exploitation, and defamation. According to her complaint, I had deceived her for 2 years, used her money to pay off personal debts, spoken poorly about her to colleagues and friends, and caused her to lose her job. She was demanding $150,000 in damages. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Every single word was a lie, but it was written so convincingly with such detail that I could see how someone who did not know the truth might believe it. I immediately called a lawyer, a guy named Thomas Brennan, who specialized in civil litigation. He read through the complaint and gave it to me straight. "This is serious," he said. "Even though the claims are false, you need to prepare a solid defense. These things can go either way, depending on how well you present your case." The retainer fee was $5,000, money I did not have readily available. I had to borrow it from my parents, which meant explaining the entire situation to them. My mom was furious, not at me, but at Jessica. My dad just shook his head and said, "The truth will come out, son. You just need to stay strong." But sitting in that lawyer's office, I did not feel strong. I felt vulnerable and scared. Thomas laid out what we needed to do. We had to gather evidence, lots of it. Bank statements, text messages, emails, anything that could prove my innocence. I spent the next 2 weeks compiling everything. I printed out every text conversation Jessica and I ever had. I pulled bank statements going back 3 years, highlighting every transaction to show that not only had I never taken money from her, but I had actually paid for most of our shared expenses during our relationship. In fact, she still owed me $3,000 in back rent that she never paid. I got a written statement from Marcus, who could testify to my mental state after the breakup. He could confirm that I was devastated, that I spent weeks barely eating or sleeping, that I was not out there bad-mouthing Jessica to anyone. I reached out to Lauren, my colleague, who Jessica had been so paranoid about. Lauren agreed to provide a statement confirming that our relationship was purely professional, and she even mentioned the incident when Jessica showed up at our office building and screamed at her in the parking lot. Security had to intervene that day too. But even with all this evidence, I could not sleep at night. I would lie awake thinking about the trial, imagining the worst-case scenarios. What if the judge did not believe me? What if Jessica's lies were convincing enough? What if I lost everything? The stress started affecting my work. My manager pulled me aside one day and asked if everything was okay. I gave him a vague answer about personal issues, but I could tell he was concerned. The psychological toll was immense. I felt violated, like my entire life was being picked apart and examined under a microscope. I kept asking myself how someone I had loved could do this to me. How could she sit down and write page after page of lies, knowing full well that none of it was true? Thomas, my lawyer, kept reminding me to stay calm. "Let her lies unravel themselves," he would say. "The truth is on your side." But it was hard to feel confident when so much was at stake. My mom would call every few days to check on me. She kept repeating what my dad had said. The truth always comes out, Kendall. Just hold on. But I was not sure if I believed that anymore. I had seen too many stories about innocent people getting destroyed by false accusations about how the legal system sometimes fails the people it is supposed to protect. Then 2 weeks before the trial date, Marcus called me with something interesting. He had been doing some digging on social media, trying to see if there was anything that could help my case. He had a mutual friend with Jessica, someone who still had access to her private accounts. Marcus asked this friend to take screenshots of anything relevant, and what he found was gold. Jessica had posted on her private Instagram account the one she used to vent to her close friends. The post was from a week after she filed the lawsuit. It said, "He is going to pay for leaving me. No one walks away from me." There were other posts too, all with the same vindictive tone, all making it clear that this lawsuit was not about seeking justice, but about punishing me for ending the relationship. Marcus sent me the screenshots immediately. I showed them to Thomas, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw him smile. "This is exactly what we needed," he said. "This proves her motive. This shows that she is using the court system as a weapon for revenge." But Thomas told me to keep digging. If we could establish a pattern of behavior, it would be even stronger. I started researching. I looked up Jessica's name in court records, and that is when I found it. 18 months before she met me, Jessica had filed a similar lawsuit against a previous boyfriend named Daniel. The complaint was eerily similar to mine: emotional distress, financial exploitation defamation. The case had been dismissed for lack of evidence, but the fact that it existed at all was damning. Thomas contacted Daniel's lawyer and requested copies of that case file. When we read through it, the parallels were stunning. Jessica had used almost the exact same language, the same accusations, the same demand for damages. It was like she had a template that she just filled in with different names. Thomas looked at me and said, "We have her. This proves she has a pattern of filing malicious lawsuits against men who leave her. The judge is going to see right through this." We spent the final week before the trial preparing my testimony, going over every possible question the opposing lawyer might ask, making sure I stayed calm and stuck to the facts. "Do not get emotional," Thomas kept telling me. "Just tell the truth, present the evidence, and let it speak for itself." I practiced my testimony over and over until I could recite it in my sleep. The night before the trial, I barely slept at all. I kept running through everything in my mind, thinking about what Jessica might say, how her lawyer might try to twist things. But I also felt a strange sense of calm beneath all the anxiety. I had the truth on my side. I had evidence. I had witnesses. I had everything I needed to prove my innocence. I just had to trust the system to do its job. The morning of the trial, I put on my best suit and met Thomas at the courthouse. The building was imposing, all marble and columns, the kind of place that makes you feel small and insignificant. We went through security and made our way to the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected, with wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that gave everything a harsh, clinical feel. Jessica was already there, sitting at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer. She was dressed conservatively, hair pulled back, wearing minimal makeup. She looked like the picture of innocence the victim she was pretending to be. When she saw me walk in, she shot me a look of pure hatred. It was chilling seeing that much anger directed at me from someone I had once cared about so deeply. The judge entered, and we all stood. Her name was Judge Patricia Hartman, a woman in her early 50s, with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. She took her seat and looked over the case file briefly before addressing the courtroom. "We are here for the case of Jessica Morrison versus Kendall Patterson. Counsel, are you ready to proceed?" Jessica's lawyer stood up first. He was a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, and he laid out Jessica's case with practiced ease. He painted me as a manipulative partner who had emotionally abused Jessica throughout our relationship, who had taken advantage of her financially, and who had damaged her reputation after the breakup. He made it sound so convincing that for a moment, even I almost believed I was the villain. Then Jessica took the stand. Her lawyer asked her questions, and she answered with tears streaming down her face. She talked about how I had promised her a future, how I had made her believe we were building a life together, only to betray her trust. She claimed I had borrowed $20,000 from her over the course of our relationship and never paid it back. She said I had told lies about her to my colleagues, which led to her losing her job. Every word was a fabrication, but she delivered it with such emotion, such conviction, that I could see how someone might be swayed. I sat there listening, my hands clenched under the table, trying to keep my face neutral. Thomas had warned me about this. "Do not react," he had said. "Let her tell her story. We will dismantle it piece by piece." But it was hard. Every lie that came out of her mouth felt like a knife twisting in my gut. After Jessica finished her testimony, it was our turn. Thomas stood up and began his cross-examination. He started with the financial claims. "Ms. Morrison, you stated that Mr. Patterson borrowed $20,000 from you. Do you have any documentation of this loan? Bank transfers, receipts, a written agreement?" Jessica hesitated. She looked at her lawyer, then back at Thomas. "It was not like that," she said. "It was informal. He would ask for money here and there, and I would give it to him." Thomas pulled out the bank statements we had prepared. "Your Honor, I would like to submit these documents as evidence. These are complete bank statements for both Mr. Patterson and Ms. Morrison, covering the entire duration of their relationship. As you can see, there is no record of any large transfers from Ms. Morrison to Mr. Patterson. In fact, the evidence shows the opposite. Mr. Patterson paid the majority of the rent and household expenses during their cohabitation. Ms. Morrison actually owes him approximately $3,000 in unpaid rent. The judge took the documents and examined them carefully. Jessica looked flustered, her cheeks turning red. Thomas continued. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have email correspondence where Ms. Morrison acknowledges owing Mr. Patterson money. He pulled out printed emails highlighting the relevant sections. Thomas then moved on to the emotional distress claims. He submitted the text messages where Jessica had threatened me, where she had said things like, 'If you leave me, I will make sure you regret it, and I know people who can ruin your career.' Judge Hartman read through them, her expression growing more severe with each message. Next, Thomas called Lauren to the stand. She testified about our professional relationship, confirming that there had never been anything romantic or inappropriate between us. She also described the incident where Jessica had confronted her in the office parking lot, screaming accusations and creating a scene that required security intervention. Lauren was calm and credible, and I could see the judge taking notes. Then Marcus testified. He talked about my emotional state after the breakup, how I had been devastated and depressed, how I had spent weeks trying to process what had happened. He confirmed that I had never spoken negatively about Jessica to him or anyone else. "I just wanted to move on," Marcus said. He was hurting, but he was not vindictive. After Marcus stepped down, Thomas dropped what he called the nuclear option. "Your Honor, I would like to introduce evidence that Ms. Morrison has a history of filing similar lawsuits against former partners." He presented the court records from Jessica's previous lawsuit against Daniel, along with a statement from Daniel's lawyer. "The similarities between the two cases are striking," Thomas said. "The same accusations, the same language, the same demand for damages. This is not about seeking justice for legitimate harm. This is about using the legal system as a weapon of revenge against men who end relationships with her." But Thomas was not done. He pulled out the screenshots from Jessica's social media. "These posts, Your Honor, were made by Ms. Morrison shortly after she filed this lawsuit." He read them aloud. "He is going to pay for leaving me. No one walks away from me. This clearly demonstrates her motive. This is not about emotional distress or financial harm. This is about punishing Mr. Patterson for exercising his right to end a relationship. Judge Hartman leaned forward, studying the documents. She looked at Jessica with a hard, penetrating gaze. Ms. Morrison, is this your social media post? Jessica's face went pale. She stammered, trying to find words. That was taken out of context, she finally said. I was emotional. I did not mean it like that. The judge did not look convinced. She called for a 15-minute recess to review all the evidence that had been presented. During the break, I could see Jessica and her lawyer arguing in hushed tones. She was crying again, but this time it looked different. Not like the calculated tears from her testimony, but genuine panic. Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. You have got this, man, he whispered. The truth is coming out. I nodded, but I did not want to get my hopes up. I had learned not to count on anything until it was final. When we reconvened, Judge Hartman had a stack of documents in front of her. She looked at both sides of the courtroom before speaking. I have reviewed all the evidence presented today, she began. This is clearly a case where the facts tell a very different story than the allegations. Judge Hartman adjusted her glasses and continued reading from her notes. After carefully reviewing the evidence presented by both parties, this court finds that the plaintiff, Ms. Jessica Morrison, has failed to provide any credible evidence to support her claims of emotional distress, financial exploitation, or defamation. She paused, letting her words sink in. Furthermore, the evidence presented by the defendant, Mr. Kendall Patterson, demonstrates not only that these claims are without merit, but that they appear to be part of a pattern of malicious intent and abuse of the legal system. I felt my chest tighten, but in a good way, like I could finally breathe after holding my breath for months. The judge was not finished. This lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice, meaning Ms. Morrison cannot refile these claims. Additionally, given the frivolous nature of this lawsuit and the clear evidence of malicious intent, Ms. Morrison is ordered to pay Mr. Patterson's legal fees in the amount of $12,000. Jessica let out a choked sob. Her lawyer put his hand on her arm, but she shook it off. Judge Hartman continued, her voice stern. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the Bar Association for review. The court does not take kindly to attorneys who pursue lawsuits that appear designed to harass and intimidate rather than seek legitimate legal remedy. Your conduct in accepting and pursuing this case will be examined. Jessica's lawyer went pale. This was worse than just losing the case. This was a threat to his professional license. Judge Hartman gathered her papers. This court is adjourned. She struck her gavel, and it was over. I sat there for a moment, stunned. Thomas turned to me and extended his hand. Congratulations, Kendall. Justice was served today. I shook his hand, but I did not feel triumphant. I felt exhausted, like I had just run a marathon. Marcus came over and wrapped me in a bear hug. You did it, man. You did it. I managed a weak smile. As we left the courtroom, I glanced back and saw Jessica still sitting at her table, her head in her hands, shoulders shaking. Part of me, a small part, felt sorry for her, but mostly I just felt relieved. This nightmare was finally over. The next 2 weeks were strange. I kept expecting something else to happen, some other shoe to drop, but nothing did. Life slowly started to return to normal. I went back to work with a clearer head. My manager noticed the change immediately. You seem lighter, he said one day. I just smiled and said I had resolved some personal issues. Then Marcus sent me a link to a local news article. The headline read, "Former marketing executive faces legal trouble over resume fraud." I clicked on it, and there was Jessica's name. According to the article, her former employer had discovered that she had falsified several achievements on her resume and in performance reviews. They were suing her for $25,000 in damages related to bonuses and promotions she had received based on those false claims. Apparently, the lawsuit against me had drawn attention to her professional history. Someone at her old company had started digging, and everything unraveled from there. Jessica had lost her job months ago, which I had known, but I had always assumed it was for other reasons. Now it was clear that she had been building her career on lies, just like she had tried to build her case against me on lies. I showed the article to Thomas. He read it and shook his head. Karma has a way of catching up with people, he said. Jessica was already on the hook for $12,000 in my legal fees, and now she was facing another $25,000 lawsuit. According to the article, she had moved back in with her parents in a suburb outside Seattle. Her car had been repossessed. Everything was falling apart for her. I did not feel happy about it. I did not feel vindicated or satisfied. I just felt sad. Sad that someone could be so consumed by bitterness and anger that they would destroy their own life in an attempt to destroy someone else's. Marcus asked me if I thought she deserved it. I do not think anyone deserves to lose everything, I said. But she made her choices. She filed a false lawsuit. She lied under oath. She tried to weaponize the legal system for revenge. These are the consequences. About a month after the trial, I received an email from Jessica. It was long and rambling, full of apologies and excuses. She said she had been consumed by anger after our breakup, that she had let her emotions cloud her judgment. She did not expect me to forgive her. She wrote, but she wanted me to know that she regretted everything. She was in therapy now, trying to work through her issues, trying to become a better person. I read the email 3 times. I thought about responding, about telling her that I accepted her apology, that I hoped she found peace. But in the end, I did not. I just deleted it. I did not need her apology. I did not need closure from her. I had already found my own closure the moment Judge Hartman dismissed her case. The months that followed were about rebuilding. I started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of being in a relationship with someone who turned out to be so toxic. My therapist helped me understand that what I had experienced was a form of emotional abuse, that the constant surveillance and accusations and control were not normal, that I had been right to end things when I did. I learned how to set boundaries in relationships, how to recognize red flags early, how to trust my instincts. I threw myself into my work and got a promotion 6 months after the trial. I started spending more time with Marcus and my other friends, the people who had stood by me during the darkest period of my life. I picked up my guitar again, something I had abandoned during my relationship with Jessica, because she always complained about the noise. I joined a hiking club and started going on weekend trips with new people who knew nothing about my past, who just saw me as Kendall, the guy who loved the outdoors and could make a decent campfire. It felt good to be seen as myself again, not as someone's boyfriend or someone's defendant, just me. About a year after the trial, I found myself standing on top of Mount Hood, looking out over the landscape. The sky was clear, the air was crisp, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt genuinely at peace. I thought about everything that had happened, all the pain and stress and fear, and I realized something important. That lawsuit was one of the worst experiences of my life, but it taught me something invaluable. It taught me that the truth has power. As long as you have evidence, as long as you stick to the facts, justice can prevail. It taught me never to let anyone make me doubt my own reality. For months, Jessica had tried to gaslight me, to make me question whether I was the problem in our relationship. But I knew the truth, and I had held on to that truth even when it was scary and difficult. Most importantly, it taught me that some people cannot be fixed, and it is not my responsibility to fix them. Jessica needed help, professional help, and no amount of love or patience or understanding from me could have changed that. The best thing I ever did was walk away when I did, even though it led to all that chaos and pain. I do not hate Jessica anymore. Honestly, I feel sorry for her. She is trapped in a cycle of her own, making hurting people, and then hurting herself in the process. But that is not my problem anymore. I have moved on. I have built a life that I am proud of, surrounded by people who genuinely care about me. If there is one thing I want you to take away from this story, it is this: never let someone else's lies define your truth. When someone tries to destroy you with false accusations, it is terrifying and overwhelming, but you have to stand firm. Gather your evidence, trust the process, and believe that the truth will come out. Because in the end, people who weaponize the legal system for revenge often end up destroying themselves more than they destroy their intended target. Have you or someone you know ever dealt with a false accusation or a vengeful ex? Drop your story in the comments below. I would love to hear how you handled it. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with anyone who might be going through something similar. And do not forget to subscribe, because I will be sharing more stories about overcoming adversity and finding strength in difficult times. Thank you for watching, and remember, the truth always has a way of coming to light. Stay strong, stay honest, and never let anyone dim your light.